Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Redeemer Lutheran Church Bible study on the Book of Proverbs. Today, Proverbs chapter 27, the strangest chapter in all of Proverbs, with the oddest, most enigmatic sayings in the entire book. I'm Pastor Eric Kleinschmidt from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Highland, Indiana. I will put the link to the worship service from this weekend up above for you right there. Okay, Proverbs chapter 27 deals with the sayings of Solomon. Some of them are going to be repetitions from the earlier section up until like chapter 19 almost. So we're going to see some repetition here of things that are familiar to us, but Solomon is going to say them in a little bit different way here. So there's still something else to learn from the Proverbs. And that's part of the joy of studying Proverbs, as well as the entire scriptures, that the more you look at them and the more you turn them over in your mind, the more you plumb the riches of the depths, as it were. So you learn continually more and more through Bible study, and even pastors. It's one of the things that we'll all tell you is that we can study a text for years, a lifetime even, and still find new things and new applications. Solomon's wisdom is no different. Of course, Solomon gets his wisdom from God, so we make that connection, and then it makes perfect sense. We're going to see some advice about dealing with both friends and family, and also fools, although the fool is going to take a little bit of a hiatus for a while. So Mr. T, you're going to have to, take a back seat for a little bit. The fool is only going to show up right here at the beginning and then once again at the end. And unfortunately for you sluggard fans out there, the slug doesn't appear in this section at all. So sorry if that's what you were hoping for Proverbs chapter 27. Let's get into the text itself and see where Solomon will teach us today. Chapter 27 begins, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." Obviously, we can't see the future, and so to make big promises and, tomorrow I will be $1 billion richer, or whatever that was, that's not something really to boast about, because you don't know what the future may hold. You could lose everything tomorrow. You could die in the night. Jesus tells that parable about the guy that had great crops and big barns, and he said, I'm going to build bigger barns. And God calls him the fool and says, this very night your soul is demanded of you. And then whose will all your stuff become? So we can't see the future. Jesus tells us not to worry about the future, because today has enough to worry about all on its own. And so we are called to pay attention to what's in front of us today. It doesn't mean we shouldn't make plans, and we shouldn't have goals, and we shouldn't have hopes. It just means that we shouldn't do so to the expense of what is right in front of us today. It's one of the secrets to contentment. Verse 2, "Let another praise you and not your own mouth." So don't be arrogant and boastful. These two proverbs right here at the beginning of chapter 27 kind of go together. "A stranger and not your own lips." True praise will be recognized and given by others, right? You all know those people that like to talk up themselves and all these great things that they do. And you know how people react to that, right? And so Solomon's advice here is don't be one of those people. Instead, let your actions speak for themselves. And as people recognize that you are honest, that you are good at what you do, they will praise you. And that will matter a lot more than you going around telling people how important and how great you are. Verse 3 is a really strange one, and I struggle with understanding exactly what's trying to be said here. And it's really the first one of these proverbs that is a kind of a little bit of a head scratcher. There's going to be more in this chapter than any other chapter. A stone is heavy. Okay, we understand that. Sand is weighty. I don't want to carry bags of sand either. But a fool's provocation is heavier than both. Okay. So the fool appears here, all right? And we'll talk about that. This really isn't in chapter 27 in a second here. But let's just look at the words. A fool's provocation. All right. Provocation is provoking a response from someone else, right? At least that's the way it reads to me. So it's it's bad to have to carry a heavy stone. It's worse to have to carry sandbags. I don't want to do either of those. But to shoulder the provocation that a fool has caused is heavier than both of them. That I would rather carry a heavy stone than have to deal with a fool that is provoking me to anger and feeling that anger. That's what I think is being said here. You could also read this as a what provokes a fool, a fool's provocation, as a possessive. It's the thing that provokes the fool and not what the fool provokes in others. That is kind of unclear to me in the text here. And I don't know how to explain that viewpoint as well. So I guess I'm going with the first one. But also I think it's more accurate, and Solomon is a great understander of human nature. And when somebody who is being difficult provokes you, you know that you should just let it go. They're an idiot, they're a fool, they're whatever you want to call them, right? It shouldn't matter. They're wrong, they're completely off base. And yet, don't we find that we obsess about those things, even when we know we shouldn't take them to heart, even though we know when other people aren't really going to believe that? It tends to vex us in a way that other things don't. And I think Solomon understands that. And so I think that being provoked by a fool and knowing that we shouldn't let it get to us, but realizing that it does, is a heavy, heavy weight, because you're not only angry at the fool, then you're angry at yourself. Why can't I just let this go? Why can't I just ignore it? Why can't I let it roll off my back? That type of thing. So I think that's what Solomon is saying here, but I'm not wise enough to really tell you for sure. You'll have to look at it, read it yourself, and come to your own understanding. I told you at the beginning that the fool doesn't really appear in chapter 27. The previous chapter was all about dealing with foolish people, and the fool doesn't appear in chapter 27 except here at the beginning and then right at the end. And at the end, there's actually a different word that's used for fool as in the previous chapters. And it's really translated more as a stubborn fool or repetitive fool or a hopeless fool. All of those sorts of that continual foolishness that's there despite attempts at correction. That's not this word here in verse 3. So a lot of commentators and people actually believe that verses 1 through 4 of chapter 27 are actually better suited for being appended to the chapter 26, okay? A lying tongue hates its victims. A flattering mouth works ruin. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. That's how chapter 26 ends. And then we have this, do not boast about tomorrow. You do not know what brave bring. Will another praise you, not your own mouth? A stranger, a fool's provocation. It seems thematically more in line with what we saw there. Now, Proverbs is one of those books where the chapter breaks just sort of were inserted willy-nilly, okay? But there is some tradition and understanding of where they might go, okay? So if you group verses 1 through 4 of 27 with 26, then the fool doesn't appear at all in chapter 27 except for at the end where it's talking about the stubborn fool. It's a different word there. Does that really matter? Does it really make any difference? Not so much. It's just one of those, how did Solomon intend this to be read? And we don't have a really clear answer to all of that. Within this chapter of 27, there's a lot of artistic representation in the Hebrew. So the words for several proverbs will share a common root. We will see a little bit of that, but not so much because we're not reading it in the Hebrew. And you can tell that, okay, so somebody put these together with a purpose. And it maybe it was beautiful to listen to in the original language, but all that kind of doesn't make up for the fact that these proverbs just seem a collection of stuff thrown in a box is kind of what it is. And trying to figure them out, especially because a lot of them are cryptic in the Hebrew. This is just the most enigmatic chapter. It's an enigma, difficult to understand. than any other, in my opinion. And that's part of what makes it fun, I think. But I won't have a lot of clear answers for you today, maybe. So maybe that's not a good thing. But anyway, whether we group verses 1 through 4 with chapter 26 or 27, the wisdom remains the same. Here, verse 4, wrath is cruel, anger is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? Wrath comes and goes, anger will pass too, but jealousy can last a lifetime. And it's sort of all-encompassing and often leads to anger and wrath and thievery and slander and all kinds of other sins. So jealousy is particularly dangerous and wicked emotion and attitude to have. Strange that God himself uses it to describe himself. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. But, and there's always the but, showing love and compassion to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. And it's in Exodus 20. It's the close of the commandments in your catechism as well. So jealousy isn't good or bad, or it can be both. It's how it's dealt with and what it leads to. God is jealous because he loves us so much he wouldn't see us go after any other god or do any other thing, right? Jealousy on our part is rarely a positive thing. Although the prophets describe themselves, I've been very jealous for the Lord. We just read Elijah saying that when he fled Jezebel. We were reading that in our Sunday morning Bible class here. And when he goes out and to meet God, he says, I've been very jealous. He actually uses the Lord's word against him. He said, oh, you're a jealous God? Well, I've been very jealous, and now Jezebel is going to kill me. So thanks a lot, God. That's kind of the attitude that we're getting from Elijah in that chapter. So jealousy isn't necessarily bad, but for human experience, it almost always is. So, verse 5. Better is open rebuke, so open correction, than hidden love, right? You want people around you to tell you when you're doing something wrong. Lots of people don't like that. Well, nobody likes that. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody likes to hear that they've done something wrong, even when it's true, right? But true friends and people who truly do love us will tell us that, especially when it's harmful to ourselves or to other people. So that's better than somebody that, loves you and just doesn't ever tell you anything. It's just like, oh, yeah, sure. No. We want friends around for counsel and correction. And that is a secret to a well-rounded life, I think. Being surrounded by people that will rebuke you. Unfortunately, that's not the way that most people choose friends these days. It's not people how they run their social media platforms. Oh, I don't like what you said. Okay, I'm blocking you. Okay. Or even trying to do that in our culture, right? Somebody says something we don't like. Well, we want to silence that voice. Well, that's not actually a good thing. We want to have those conversations out in the open, and they're not always going to be pleasant, but sometimes they can be good. Verse 6, faithful are the wounds of a friend, right? So a friend who wounds you through open rebuke, it kind of goes along with verse 5, is actually a good thing. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. So yeah, the enemies try to cover up what they really hope for you with flattery, with showering with gifts, those sorts of things. Obviously, we're directed towards the betrayal of Judas, right? That's on our minds too, because we're always reading Jesus into and out of the Old Testament. So that we can't get around that. Verse 7, one who is full loathes honey. So you've just eaten a large meal, right? And you got all kinds of stuff. And honey is just a incredible blessing from God. In the Bible, honey is almost like the perfect food. It's the closest to God's food you're going to get. If we were Greeks, we would talk about it like ambrosia, right? That the Greek gods ate. Honey is just this depiction of a perfect, beautiful blessing and food, right? But one who is full doesn't even want that. They're like, oh, no, I can't eat another thing. No, I can't. but to one who is hungry, everything bitter is sweet. So, if you were starving and I set in front of you an arugula salad, you, on its own, arugula is kind of like, I like it on pizza, strangely enough. I don't know why, but I like arugula on pizza. I can't explain it, but I wouldn't want to eat it on its own, kind of a thing, right? But if I was starving, I'll eat arugula salad. Sure, bring it on, right? So one of the things that I think is happening here is something that we see throughout the scripture. And that is that when things are good, when we are full, all right, we often don't appreciate what we have. And we are often not faithful. The big litmus test is kind of looking at your own life and asking yourself, well, do I tend to pray more when things are going good or when things are going bad? And for, I would say, almost everybody, it's we pray the most, and we are in that respect more faithful when we are in need and when we are in want and when we are suffering. Jesus promises that we will have such things if we follow after him, and those things produce in us good qualities, perseverance, right? Faithfulness, right? He says that. So part of the way that God might keep us close is by allowing us to suffer the just consequences of our sin and living life in a sinful world. It's hard to accept that when we're going through the suffering, right? But when we look at our lives, right now we're moving up to Thanksgiving, and everybody's thankful for everything they have, right? We're attitude of gratitude and all that good stuff, right? But really, most of us aren't waking up every day and counting our blessings. We might have a sign in our house that says that, but we don't really do that. We don't just have a great day and go, God, thank you for just this great day. Everything went well. That meeting went well. Beautiful weather. My car started just fine. My heart seems to be beating. I had a great lunch. We're not living constant lives of thankfulness. But if we're struggling, we don't leave God's ear alone, right? We're constantly coming to him in prayer. God, I need help. I need help now. Like it's been 15 minutes. God, I need help, kind of a thing. Oh, now this is going wrong. God, when will I get relief? Okay, that's pretty normal. It's part of human experience. Complacency is one of our biggest enemies. So I think this text speaks to that. One who is full when things are going well and you have all that you need, even great blessings you don't really care about. But when you're hungry, you tend to appreciate things for what they truly are. Verse 8, like a bird that strays from its nest is a man who strays from his home. This proverb has connotations of adultery, okay? We're not just talking about somebody who travels here, all right? We're talking about a home life. He strays from his home, meaning from his wife and family. So he is going after the adulteress, as we have seen earlier in some of the Proverbs. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, okay? And the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. So oil and perfume, anointing the body, we like to be clean, we like to be presentable, we might have a perfume or a scent that we like, and it makes us happy, makes people happy around us maybe too, unless it's overpowering. People, especially in church, like scale it back, all right? Sometimes it's difficult to sing as you breathe in for the next verse and you get a full lung of somebody's perfume that is on way too strong and is filling the whole church with whatever it is, all right? So just advice for a lot of those with sensitive noses, maybe scale it back for Sunday morning a little bit, all right? Oil and perfume, sure, they're intended to make the heart glad, but really the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. It comes from telling us the truth. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Better is open rebuke. All of those things are what makes a good friend and makes for his good counsel. And those are the type of people that we want to surround ourselves with. We'll see this idea of being with good people come up again and again through this chapter. It's kind of one of the themes, not only dealing with your family, but also in choosing the friends and the people you spend your time with. When we get to the iron sharpening iron verse, that'll be a little bit more apparent. Likewise, verse 10, do not forsake your friend and your father's friend. Interesting here that your friendship should extend to generational friends. So you might not be friends with your parents' friend, but you should honor them just the same because they have a tie to your family. When I was growing up, there was a man that lived down the street from my dad, just a couple doors, maybe 3 or 4 houses down. His name was Skipper, or that's what they called him. He was in the Navy, and my dad was in the Navy, and my dad and him would talk about things that I didn't even understand or comprehend what they were saying most of the time, but they sure enjoyed each other's company. And Skipper was always very nice to me, right? And I always tried to be nice to him. Now, I didn't really have a personal friendship with him. I was probably like, in grade school, and he was in his 60s. And we didn't really share many interests. He liked to watch golf and liked to mow his lawn and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't like to do those things. So it's not like we had really great conversations about shared interests or anything like that. But he was a family friend, and I was saddened at his passing. So Solomon actually says that those family friends deserve our respect too. And just because you don't have a personal relationship with your sibling's friend or your parent's friend, or I would say it goes the other way around, your kids' friends, you should care for them because they're important to people that you care about. That kind of makes sense. Wisdom of Solomon is, we talk about common sense, and perhaps it's not that common, but perhaps it is divine. Do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. All right, this is odd. So, okay, you've had a calamity. Something terrible has happened to you. And now you're told that you should not go to your brother's house when that happens. So something bad happens to you. Solomon is telling you, don't go to your brother's house. Now, what does this mean? It's another thing. I got to tell you, I really am not quite sure. The commentaries that I've read are all over the place, right? The one that I trust the most, and quite frankly, I get a lot of what I teach you from this book here, Concordia Commentary, right? Andrew Steinman, available from Concordia Publishing House, our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Publishing House. He looks at it as that you should not overwhelm your family when bad things happen to you repetitively. This doesn't seem in Dr. Steinman's commentary to be something like grandma died. Let's gather, together and talk about this and comfort each other. That's not what this seems to be about. This seems to be like anytime something bad happens, you run to your brother and say, I need help. It seems to be a proverb about self-reliance, okay, and not just looking to other people to fix things, okay? We've seen proverbs before in the chapters before about not being a continual asker, right? That seems to feed into this, I think. That this isn't about something bad has happened, I want to go see my brother. Solomon isn't telling you not to do that. It's overburdening your family with your problems and not really solving them and relying on yourself. That seems to be what it's talking about, at least from my perspective. Again, these proverbs, some of them are just very strange and very hard to figure out what Solomon actually was meaning, but perhaps that's part of the mystery, is that it can be applied in different ways depending upon different situations, and that's part of its wisdom, perhaps. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away. That makes sense, right? Especially if something has happened. So you want friends that'll help you rather than family that are far away. So make friends locally, I guess. How that fits in with don't overburden them by constantly going over to their house every time something bad happens and asking for their help every time something bad happens, I don't really know. Something to contemplate and think about right there in verse 10. Verse 11, and then moving on into 18, begins a new section in which Solomon is going to repeat Proverbs from earlier chapters. But they're not going to be verbatim. They're going to be very similar, but they're going to also have a little bit more nuance. Why does Solomon place this kind of interlude here in chapter 27? I don't really know. Is it just he's thought, oh yeah, don't forget about these, or what prompted him? I don't really have those answers. So we see a little bit of a shift, and things seem to be kind of out of place for a little bit. But they're also going to be familiar, and as we've talked about before, artists tend to reuse material. And so Solomon's writing thousands and thousands of proverbs. That wisdom doesn't go old. Just because he said it once doesn't mean that it's now over and done. And we see that here as he gives it a new nuance and a new phraseology here and there. So be wise, my son, and make my heart glad. Remember, wisdom really here is faithfulness. Wisdom in Proverbs comes from God. It's attentiveness and knowledge and putting into practice God's word. So it's not just making good decisions, but making good decisions is also part of it. Be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, that I may answer him who reproaches me. So who is reproaching Solomon and why? Well, we're not given that information. But Solomon is saying, like, my children will vindicate me. At least that's Solomon's hope. So somebody comes to Solomon and say, well, you're a terrible, terrible ruler, you're a terrible guy, you're dishonest, whatever. And Solomon is actually saying, I'm going to point to my children as proof that those things aren't true. So his good reputation is going to be carried on in his children. Now, with Solomon, that didn't actually happen. Because Solomon's kids really, and then their kids, and the kingship of God's people just went downhill very, very fast because they forgot the Lord their God. That was the first thing, right? So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If they gave up the fear of the Lord in favor of chasing after Baal and Asherah as they did, they lost that wisdom very, very, very quickly. So it's kind of tragic as we read that this did not really happen for Solomon. That's hope that his sons would be evidence of his wisdom and prudence and faithfulness, and that they were going to defend Solomon when somebody came as an accuser against him. We can see how this happens. We want our children to be good representatives of our family and our family name, and when they do something that is dumb, wicked, sinful, whatever it happens to be, all three, it reflects badly upon our family and our reputation, and that's something that we don't want. So this still applies today, and it's still a hope for parents everywhere, I think. But it was no different for Solomon. The prudent, again, prudent is a person who puts God's wisdom into practice. The prudent person sees danger and hides himself. He walks away. But the simple go on and suffer for it. And I've told you about this before, the group of people arguing out in front of the bar in the middle of the street, and then a drunk driver ran through the middle of them and killed like 4 of them. And you're like, okay, if you just would have looked at like, hey, this is getting out of control. I don't want to be here. I'm going to leave. Instead, they all rallied around watching, filming with their phones, right? So I would say if you have kids, teach them that when they see trouble happening, Get out of there. Don't stand by and record it on your phone. It's not worth the likes, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. Just get out of there. And a little bit of advice. So I work with teens. I have all my ministry, really. My first call was here as an associate pastor, dealing primarily with the youth. And I really love doing that. I never thought that I would. I thought that was for the fun pastors that like to play dodgeball and play guitar and stuff like that. Kids wouldn't react to me, but I found that if you just care for them, you develop a relationship, and there's an affinity that comes with that. And I really do now have a care and passion for helping, particularly teenagers. I counsel a number of them that walk past our church because the high school is right there. Just put out a little kiosk of prayers, and there's 3 missing. And I saw one kid reading it, so that's a victory. Just prayers for their day. Call it rough day prayers, right? Anyway, a bit of advice. Your kids, your teenagers are going to be in those situations at some point, and they're going to be like, I don't know if I really should be here, and I don't really want to be here, but I can't really get out. If I told mom or dad that I was here, I would have to hear about it, and they'd be very angry. Let's use the example of an underage drinking party. Okay, even if it wasn't supposed to be that, your child gets invited to a party, they go, and they find out that, hey, the person's parents aren't actually home, and there's alcohol here. And now what do I do? Because I came with my friend, and they're fully into this, and I don't know what to do, even if they're not drinking. But even if they were, you got to give them that safety net. So tell your kids that, give them a get out of jail free card for at least that day. And tell them, like, okay, if you're in a situation and it's going south and you want to get out of there, but you're afraid of what I might say, call me and tell me. Remember that conversation we had about how I could always call you to come and get me without any questions asked that day? I need you to do that. Some families even develop like a password, like armadillo or something like that. So the child calls up 11:30 at night on a Friday. The parent's like, "What are you calling? It's late. Where are you?" And the child just says, "I need you to come and get me, armadillo." Right? I'll meet you at the corner of 5th Street and Main or something like that. All right. And parents, for the love of all good things, get up, go, and honor that. And just get in the car. You might say, "Hey, are you okay?" "Okay. All right. Let's go home." And then save it. Save it for tomorrow. Maybe that's part of your deal. That, okay, I'll pick you up anywhere. All right. No questions asked. But in the next 48 hours, we're going to have a conversation about what was going on, okay? So those sorts of things. But I encourage you to at least give your children the option so they don't feel like they're stuck, because a lot of bad things happen when kids feel like they're stuck. So just a little bit of unsolicited parental advice from someone who has a 4-year-old. But I've worked with youth, and when they know that they do have an out, even if it's going to be a difficult one, it changes things. Whereas if they feel like they're just stuck, okay? Take a man's garment when he has put up security for a stranger. Earlier Proverbs warned us about doing this. Said, don't do this. Like, don't co-sign on loans for people, right? If you're going to have to deal with a stranger, take some collateral. Hold it up in pledge when he puts up security for an adulteress. So you have a guy that wants you to help insure a loan for a stranger, and you're supposed to take collateral for that. and then you hold on to it when he puts up security for an adulteress, I do not understand this proverb at all. Especially because previous proverbs told us not to do these sorts of things. I don't know. So if I go to the commentary here, 27:13, this verse, which is a variant of Proverbs 20, verse 16, is advice about holding people to the pledges they have made, especially when there is great risk of default. And that's all I get from the guy who has a PhD in this sort of stuff. So I guess that's all we get. I think there's more here, but honestly, I just don't understand it. I'm still rolling this one around in my head, and I don't have a sensible explanation because we were warned not to do this in the first place previously. So I got to study this one a little bit more before I can tell you. Maybe you got a good answer, and if you do, tell me what you think it means. Verse 14, whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as cursing. You know what this proverb is about? Mourning people. Nobody likes mourning people. Not even Solomon. That's what this is saying. Whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice early in the morning, it's counted as cursing, right? So if you're going to get up early to get the worm, at least be quiet about it. All right? That's what I see when I read this. I don't think that's really maybe what Solomon meant, but just humorously, that's what I get. I think this really has to do with knowing the proper time to do things. People require tactfulness, right? Tact is one of those things that really can't be taught. It has to be learned, and some people never, ever learn it. One of the things that pastors have to learn is that there is a time and a place for everything. And determining when and where those time and places are, that's an art form. And even pastors that have been doing the job for 40 years still get that wrong sometimes. But I will tell you, we do generally get better at it, because I do see vicars get better at it from when they show up to when they leave, and then meeting them later on in their ministry. So when they come out of seminary, our vicars are very much like seek and destroy missiles, okay? They're theological missiles. So they're there. They got all this payload of information, good theology, biblical references, and proof texts, and then a target appears on the screen, and they fire and destroy. That's what they do. So they are completely oblivious as to time and space. So when somebody says something like, well, your grandma now is an angel in heaven, okay, that is a theologically erroneous statement. People do not become angels. Angels are created beings. They were created within the first 6 days of creation. People do not get wings and become angels. We're better than that, actually. Read the Bible, you'll find out that what I'm telling you is true. So this whole idea that people become angels is just popular culture nonsense, okay? But a lot of people believe it because they've never read their Bible and never been trained. So when vicars hear that, immediately they seek off to destroy that heretical nonsense. And they don't realize that maybe at the funeral visitation, standing over the dead body is not the place to address their erroneous theology, okay? Like, you want to maybe wait a week? Maybe you want to wait until at least like the luncheon afterwards and say, when you hear it again, or maybe you just kind of let it go and teach to that effect. Those can be tactful answers, right? So I think that's really what this is referring to. People take tact, and knowing when the time and the place for doing things is just as important as doing them. So blessing your neighbor, great. Doing it with a loud voice, okay. Doing it with a loud voice early in the morning, standing outside their bedroom window saying, hey, Earl, just want to let you know, I think you're awesome, man. You know, you're a really great friend. He's going to be like, dude, it's 4:30 in the morning. Go home. Love you too. Leave me alone. I think that's what we're seeing here in verse 14. But humorously, I'd say it's against all you mourning people. Verse 15, a continual dripping on a rainy day. So you hear this drip, 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 and a quarrelsome wife are alike. The quarrelsome wife, and by extension, obviously, a quarrelsome husband. It goes both ways, and we're just being obtuse if we think that the Bible is only speaking to one side of the marriage equation and all of these things. But that theme has come up previous, so be careful whom you marry, and it'll wear everything down. Water always wins is a rule, right, for existence. And continual dripping, a quarrelsome wife, eventually you're going to be dragged into a quarrel. To restrain her, that is the quarrelsome wife, is to restrain the wind. You can't do it. Or to grasp oil in one's right hand. You try to grab it to gather it up, and it just goes. It's useless, is what Solomon is saying in 15 and 16. And those two obviously go together. Verse 17 is one of the most quoted proverbs among pastors and theologians and theological podcast people. Iron sharpens iron. The idea is that gathering together with other people who hold your values and know something about the Bible to talk about the Bible is going to be beneficial for both of you. However, iron on iron can also dull them. And so the converse is also true, I would say. So here we have only the positive. Iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another. The converse is also true in that we can dull each other. So if you're hanging around with dullards, not sluggards, but dullards, if you're hanging around with evil people that devise violence and schemes, bad company ruins good morals. That's just a standard understanding. It comes from the wisdom of God, of course, but it's pretty much what we would call common sense. So we want to be careful about who we surround ourselves with, both friends and family, and who we do business with. All of that is present in Proverbs. Verse 18, whoever tends a fig tree will eat its fruit, and he who guards his master will be honored. Here at the close of these repetitious proverbs, Solomon directs us towards doing our honorable duty. So a person who tends a fig tree, that's his vocation, that's his job. And so he should eat of its fruit. It's rightfully his. He has tended to it. He who guards his master will be honored. So we're talking there about, we're not going to call it a caste system, but there's an order to this. So there is a master and there is somebody who is set to serve. And so somebody who guards their master, as is appropriate to their vocation and their position in life, is doing their duty, and that will bring honor. So all the proverbs about good hard work, all the proverbs about doing your work honestly, about honoring those that God has called you to honor, fourth commandment kind of stuff, all of that comes to play here in Proverbs 18. And I don't think this proverb is quoted or written this way anywhere else in the book of Proverbs. But the themes are there, and what we see here in this section of repetitious proverbs from Solomon is he is taking what he said before and bringing new nuance and making new connections and even summarizing it a little bit so it's fresh and new and more has more application than it did before, perhaps. Verse 19, as in water, a face reflects face. So you look at a cool, a calm pool of water, it's like a mirror, right? So just like that, the heart reflects the man. So what the man does and what he cares about and how he demonstrates things like mercy and kindness and generosity reflect who he is. We see the very same thing that Jesus says in Matthew 12, particularly Matthew 12:33 and following. Jesus says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. All right, he's talking about the Pharisees here. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Okay? So just as a reflection is your reflection, the heart and what you care about, what you love, and how you demonstrate kindness, generosity, self-control, the fruits of the Spirit, they reflect who you are. Sometimes our perception of a person is off. We may think that this is a really gruff type of person that doesn't like anybody, but then you'll also find that when their neighbor was, laid off, that he was going to the grocery store and buying twice as many groceries and just dropping them off on the doorstep in the middle of the night so that the man next door never even knew where they came from. He just woke to find new groceries every week, right? So there we learn that appearances can be deceiving. So the heart is what really matters, and we don't always get to see the heart. But the Bible tells us that God will judge the heart both ways. There's people that cover up an evil heart with a lot of good things and a lot of service to other people, and a lot of kindness, and a lot of throwing their money around, but their heart really is not there. So it goes both ways, but rest assured that God sees it. 20. Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, and never satisfied are the eyes of man. So let's deal with the second part first. Never satisfied are the eyes of man. Greed, all right, a desire to collect, to gather, and to hold on to. That is something that we never really overcome. We always want more, we want different, we want better, we want now rather than later. That's just a condition of our sinful nature. So we understand that. But what are Sheol and Abaddon, and how are they never satisfied? Sheol in the Old Testament is a difficult word because it's used in different ways. Sheol can just mean death. It can mean the ground, the grave, the place of the dead. It can also mean something akin to like hell, the place where the dead are judged for their sin and remain. All of them are gathered around the theme of death, though. So when you see Sheol, think death, okay? Abaddon is really a word for destroyer, okay? It appears then in Revelation. It's in other places in the revelatory literature in the Old Testament as well. Abaddon is destruction. So if Sheol is death, Abaddon is destruction. So if you put those two together, death and destruction are never satisfied. They continue to do what they do, right? People still die. It's like death never gets its fill. Abaddon, destruction continues to happen. They're never satisfied. And so it is with the eyes of man. We always want more. We consume it. It breaks it down, but we just want more and more and more and more. It never stops. So being content is to try to put a halt to that. And that's one of the virtues of godly living, is trying to be content with what you have and recognizing that every good gift is from the hand of God. If he wanted us to have it, we would. The crucible is for silver and the furnace is for gold. So we switch completely to a different metaphor here. A man is tested by his praise. Okay, you can learn a lot about a person by the way that they both give praise to others and accept praise from others. Okay, so let's deal with the second one first. How do you accept praise? When somebody tells you that you did a really good job, what is your reaction? Well, there's different kinds of people, but I would say probably a slight majority of people, their reaction is deflection. It was no big deal. It was nothing. Oh, well, I didn't really do all of the work. It was really set up for me by Earl, who did most of the legwork, and I just kind of finished it off, Or my team really did a great job and put everything together, so I really did very little. That we think is building humility. And sometimes it does. When those things are true, it's important to say that. If really all you did was come in and hand the stack of papers that a 5-person team had worked 6 months on, and all you do is you take that stack and you walk it over to your boss and you go, here's what the team put together, and he goes, hey, great job. There you probably better give credit where credit was due. But if you were involved in that process too, you deserve some of that as well. And to deflect is sometimes to diminish what the person is trying to give you. It invalidates their gift in a way. So a lot of us have to learn how to accept a compliment properly. Okay, it has to do with etiquette, it has to do with all kinds of things. But so when somebody compliments you, rather than deflect that, you can just say, well, thank you, and then explain the other things. It's like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't do it alone. I had a great team that put together this whole proposal. They worked much longer on it than I did. But thank you. I will share. I will share your praise with the team that deserves it as well. Thank you. Yeah, so you can be gracious in that way, and that will teach you something about the person. People that can do that well are just beautiful to watch, right? Because they make everybody feel good. All right. So maybe something for you to think about, not trying to deflect so much, but to just accept praise and to do it graciously and give credit where credit is due. So I'd say the majority of people deflect. Some obviously are going to go, well, of course, everything I do is great. You do have some of those people out there. And then you have some people that don't believe it at all, or explain it away, or whatever. And those kind of always short circuit what's the human interaction that's trying to happen there. So how somebody accepts praise can reveal something about them. How they give praise is the other part. There are people that simply cannot praise good things in others. They just can't do it. They just won't. They're just silent on the issue, or they will always have a caveat. Well, yeah, Earl did a good job, but it's about time, right? I mean, how many things has he bungled at this company for that sort of thing? Or they'll be like, well, it really wasn't Earl. It was his team behind him, that sort of thing. There's people that just can't give praise. There's people that do it poorly. Well, good job, man. I guess. Yeah. I guess I should say good job. It's about time. Yeah. And then there's people that will praise things when it suits them, when it's beneficial to them. My team did a great job. I handpicked them, and man, they did. I handpicked them well, right? So there you seem like you're giving praise to others, but you're really just praising yourself. So you can learn a lot about how people praise others. One of the other things is, can they praise their enemies? Can they recognize when somebody that they don't like, somebody that doesn't like them, does a nice job, and give credit where credit is due and is not threatened by that? Again, that's kind of what we want to work towards. So in the wisdom of Proverbs and Solomon of dealing with other people, we want to both accept praise properly and also give praise well, and be generous in both. All right? Wisdom of Solomon. Crush a fool in a mortar and pestle along with crushed grain, yet his folly will not depart from him. So this is the fool that returns. And if you think that verse 1 through 4 actually belongs in the previous chapter, this is the only time where the fool comes up here in chapter 27, and it's a different Hebrew word for fool. So this is a repetitive fool, a perpetual fool. So even if you grind him down into pieces and parts, there's still foolishness there. Like you look at put his cell under a microscope, and you're still going to find foolishness there. It's that pervasive in him. His folly just will not depart from him. Some people you just can't help. You just can't help. Verses 23 through 27 really bleed into the next chapter, where Solomon is going to be giving advice to kings, particularly his own children. But he doesn't start off that way here in 23. Know well the condition of your flocks. So the shepherd metaphor for Israel's kings is prevalent throughout the ancient world, particularly after David for Israel. I mean, David was a shepherd before he was king, right? Jesus is the good shepherd. He's also the king. So people in positions of authority are called sheep herders because, well, they have to organize all the sheep and get them where they need to go. So Solomon here is using the metaphor of a shepherd and his flocks to talk to his kings and their subjects, okay? So know well the condition of your subjects. Give attention to your cities, or the people that you're supposed to be caring for. For your riches will not last forever. Does a crown endure to all generations? It's a rhetorical question. No, it doesn't. When the grass is gone and the new growth appears, the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the people will provide your clothing, and the people will give you the price of a field. So your subject will take care of you if you take care of them, is essentially what Solomon is saying. And this goes for parents in families. That's a little kingdom all of its own. It goes towards employment, which is its own little kingdom. It has to do with the church, which is its own little kingdom. It has to do with how God deals with us, which is the ultimate kingdom, right? God doesn't need anything from us, so the metaphor kind of breaks down on that part. But for all the rest of us, we can see, like, yeah, if you're in a position of authority, you shouldn't be a tyrant. You should take care of your people, and your people will take care of you. And there will be enough goat's milk for your food, the food of your household, and maintenance for your girls. That word, that maintenance, I don't know why the ESV chose maintenance here. Makes your daughters sound like they're cars that that need new tires and stuff. It's like maintenance here. The Hebrew word really has to do with age. It has to do with life. It has to do with sustenance. It's the root for eating. All of that is bound up in that word. We might better translate it as everything needed for body and life, right? So maybe rather than have 4 words, they chose one word of maintenance. It's just kind of a lackluster translation for the English Standard Version, in my opinion. And that brings us to the end of chapter 27. We're going to see this advice to kings carry over in chapter 28. And if you look here on the page, you'll see that there's an extra space here between these 2 verses right there. And that's a recognition by even the people that put this online that this thematically goes better with the next chapter than it does with 27. Again, the chapters and verses, those are arbitrary things, and sometimes they really help, and sometimes they kind of hinder things. But just remember that originally the text didn't have those things in them. So, a little bit of a summary. Chapter 27, we saw the wisdom of Solomon continue, giving us advice about friends and family matters. The fool kind of disappeared and then came back, but now we're talking about stubborn fools that you just can't help. There's a lot of things that we still don't understand about the wisdom of Solomon. It's still too great, at least for me. Maybe you have great enlightenment and can put on your YouTube channel and explain what I could not. Please, let me know. I'd like to check that out because I'm confused about some of these. And don't forget that nobody likes morning people. All right. Proverbs 27:14. Nobody likes morning people. I think I'm going to have to memorize that one. I'm going to put that one in my memory bank because that's going to be fun later on. So thank you for studying along with me. I'll put the link to last week's study up above. May God bless you as you seek true wisdom, which begins with the fear of the Lord. Thank you, and see you next week.